So now that we are able to read binary data and save that binary data away on the server, how about writing binary data back to the client? Currently, in our server code, we do this. So we're sending back a text message to the client. What we'd like to be able to do is to send back a copy of the image, maybe again so the client can display this as an avatar. We'll do a fairly simple example here, just sending back the binary data and having the client display that binary data as an image on the page. So to do that, rather than calling send text, we're actually going to do a couple of things. We're going to call send binary, but send binary will be a blocking call on get basic remote. So instead of calling get basic remote, we'll call get async remote. And get async remote will allow us to return binary data asynchronously to the client. So it'll send the data without this server thread blocking, and then call us back when the data send is complete. Also, when we send back binary data, we have to send that data inside a byte buffer. So the first thing we need to do here is to create a byte buffer. And we create the byte buffer, we'll call this thing send data, by using one of the byte buffer static methods. So we use byte buffer.allocate, and we need to tell it how big a byte buffer to allocate. The size of the data is already in the byte array output stream that we've buffered up. So we can use for that, it's called buffer, so buffer.toByte array, and then we just get the length of that. And that will allocate the byte buffer for us. Once we have that, we can then place the data into the byte buffer, and we do that by calling the byte buffer's put method. And again, we pass to this byte buffer to byte array. So we take the data out of the byte array output stream, and we place it into the byte buffer. So byte buffers can be in one of two modes. They can be in write mode or read mode. Currently, the byte buffer's in write mode. To switch this to read mode, we need to rewind the byte buffer. So we do that by calling send data.rewind. That says the byte buffer can now be read from. So we can read from the byte buffer and write that then down to the output stream. We can send the data back to the client. So we'll do this asynchronously. So we'll do client.session.getAsync remote rather than get basic remote. And on this we call send binary, and we pass it the byte buffer. So we'll call send binary send data. And there's a few ways of doing this. We can either have this method return as a feature, or we can pass it a callback. In this case, we'll use a callback. So we pass it a send data callback. We pass it a send handler callback. And that send handler callback has one method called onResult. And inside onResult, we just get sent the result of the send. So inside here, for now, we'll just print out the whether this send was okay or not. So we print out send result dot is okay. Close this off. We don't need the try catches anymore, so we can get rid of all of those. And we'll get rid of the try, format the page. So now we're ready to actually go and send that data. So to check that this data is actually being sent, we can go to the browser, bring up the DevTools, and inside here set a breakpoint inside the onMessage handler for our WebSocket. So inside the browser, we click Choose File, we pick one of the JPEGs, click on Upload, and sure enough our onMessage fires. And if we look at the message here, we'll see that this should be a blob. And that contains the data that's being sent back from the server. So inside our browser, we need to be able to process that blob. So if I leave this run, it throws an exception, and the exception is it's an unexpected JSON type, so you can't parse the blob into JSON. So we need to process that. So if I go back into IDEA, then inside IDEA, inside my chat view model class, where we handle the process message here, I now need to do two things. I need to check that this message is either a blob or a string message. And we can do that by saying something like if message instance of blob. So is it a blob type? If so, we'll process it one way. Else we will just process it. We'll assume it's a string message and we'll process it as a string message. If it's a blob, we want to do a couple of things. We want to set the message type to be JPEG. We want to grab a reference to an element on the screen that can display JPEG, so an image element, and then create a URL that identifies this blob and assign that URL to the element. This is easier to see in code. So we say message.type equals, and this is going to be image/JPEG. So we tell the message what type it should be. We haven't passed that back as part of the send from the server. We then create a URL, something called a URL creator. So we do var URL creator. And this is either going to come from window.url, if that thing exists, or if we're running in a WebKit browser, maybe window.webkit, a WebKit URL. Once we have the URL creator, we can create the URL that identifies this blob as an image. So I can say image URL equals URL creator dot create object URL, and we pass it the blob. So this will create a URL that references this blob that we can then use. I have an image in the HTML on the page, so I can say var image equals, and I'll just use $, to go and grab that thing, and the image is called photo, so we have hash photo, and we want element 0 from this thing, from jQuery, and I can then simply set image.source equals image URL, and then we should be good to go. So if I go back to the browser and refresh the browser, bring up the console windows, then we see here inside on message that we are now looking to see if this is an instance of blob, and we have the breakpoint here. So we go through the same process, so choose a file, pick one of the JPEGs, click on upload, and again we hit the handler. Inside here now, instance of blob should be true. Sure enough, so we set the message type to be JPEG, create the URL creator, create the image URL, and if we look at this, we'll see it's a blob URL which points at some ID that identifies what this image is, and then let the code run, and sure enough the image now appears here on the screen. So we have a way of downloading images and downloading binary data from the server to the client.